Welcome back to Rich Words Music, where today we're doing a comparison between two Harley Benton Telecaster types of electric guitar. Here in my left hand I have the TE-62CC in Lake Placid Blue, and here in my right hand I have the TE-69TL Hot Rod NT roasted in this rather delicious natural ash finish. Now these are both Telecaster types of electric guitar, however they're kind of opposite ends of the Telecaster spectrum. The TE-62CC is much more of a traditional Tele with its traditional layout and single coil pickups, and this one, the TE-69TL, is much more like a Fender Thinline Telecaster, and that means that it's got a different layout, it's got a different scratch plate, it's got a semi-acoustic body with an F-hole there, so it's chambered too, and this particular model is hot rodded, and that means that it's got a humbucking pickup in the bridge position. So you can also split it down to single coil to get Tele twangy tones, but it's very much a different kettle of Telecaster fish. So what I wanted to do in this video was give you a thorough comparison of both of these guitars, and I think this might be very useful for some of you if you're looking maybe to get your first Telecaster, or maybe you've got some already and you're considering getting another. Do you want to go more traditional, or do you want to get a bit of hot rodded thin line action into your lives? That's what we're going to find out in this video. And so what I'm going to do first is tell you the specifications and features of both of the guitars, then we're going to play them in as many different musical styles and settings as I possibly can, and at the end I'll give you some more detailed opinions about what I think about these two instruments and which one I think is going to be more worth your money at the end of the day. So stick around for the end of the video if you're interested in hearing that. But first, the specifications and features, and we'll start with the TE-62CC. So the Harley Benton TE-62CC is very much in the traditional Telecaster vein. Now looking at the body, it does look very old school. We've got the Lake Placid Blue finish, we've got a mint green scratch plate, we've got two Roswell single coil Telecaster style pickups. The rest of the hardware on this is Harley Benton or no-name stuff. So we've got a traditional 3-saddle bridge here, we've got a 3-way selector switch, we've got a volume control and a tone control as well. So it's a sort of slab almost poplar body. I don't know how many pieces of poplar wood are in this, but probably numerous. So it's a poplar body, very much a traditional sort of a thing. Moving up to the neck of this guitar, and we have a roasted maple neck, or caramelized maple, as Harley Benton refer to it. We've got 21 frets here. We've got probably medium jumbo frets. Harley Benton don't tell us on their website how big the frets are, but they feel like medium jumbo to me. Now we've got a 648mm or 25.5-inch scale length on this guitar. We've got a 42mm plastic nut, and the fingerboard radius is a very flat 305mm. That's about 12 inches, so very flat for a Telecaster type guitar. And the neck profile on this one is actually quite modern feeling too, because it's a slimmer to medium D shape, so very much decent for someone who's a shredder and wants to get into Teles, that kind of a thing. If we move up to the headstock there, you can see the traditional Harley Benton Telecaster-esque headstock and 6-in-line no-name tuners. So for €149, this is what we get with the TE-62CC. Now let's take a look at the TE-69TL and check out the similarities and differences between the two guitars. So the TE-69TL is also traditional when it comes to Thinline Telecasters. It's modelled after a 69 Fender Telecaster Thinline. Now we've got an ash body and an ash top here. We've got the natural finish, thick poly coating over it. It's a very, very beautiful guitar to look at. I really like the looks of it. You've got that slightly different scratch plate shape to that of a standard Telecaster. It's black, white, black here. And apart from that, it looks fairly traditional, but of course, we've got the hot rod pickups in this one. So it's a standard single coil Roswell neck pickup here, but the bridge pickup is hot rodded, and in standard operation it's humbucking. Now you pull up the tone control here to access the split coil mode. So all the pickups on these guitars are Roswell Alnico 5s. So we've got that push-pull tone pot, we've got a volume pot and a 3-way selector switch there, and again a traditional looking 3-saddle chrome Harley Benton or no-name bridge. Moving up to the neck of this guitar, again it's caramelized or roasted maple, and on the Harley Benton and Thomann websites they say that this is Canadian maple specifically. They don't say that about the TE-62CC. I don't know if Canadian maple is better, however I do know that the best maple syrup comes from Canadian maple trees, so possibly this is a tastier neck to play, I don't know. But anyway, the details of the neck. It's a beautiful C shape, it's satin finished just like the TE-62, but it's a thicker neck than that of the TE-62, and it's a C shape as well. Very, very comfortable. Again, we have 21 frets, and again, I'm guessing that they're medium jumbo. We also have a 42mm nut. We have a very flat fingerboard radius again, 305mm or 12 inches, and we have that Fender approved 648mm or 25.5-inch scale length. And again, the headstock there, Harley Benton 6-in-line tuners, Clousson style, very, very cool. This guitar will set you back about 220 euros, so it's about 70 euros more expensive than the TE-62CC. But is that 70 euro price difference really going to be worth it? Well, that's what we're going to find out in the rest of the video. And what we're going to do next is play both of these guitars in as many different musical styles as possible. Now, I'll be using my Hughes & Kettner Black Spirit 200 for today's sound demos. We'll start on the Amps Clean channel and we'll do a bit of twangy country, we'll play some folk and some pop and some blues as well. Then we'll go to the Amps Crunch channel and do some indie rock and some classic rock. After that, we'll go to the Amps Lead channel and we'll get some progressive rock and some hard rock and some punk rock going. And at the very end, we'll tune both of these guitars down to drop D. We'll go back to the Amps Clean channel and I'll kick in my Rev G3 distortion pedal to really see if we can make these two Telecaster type Harley Bentons chug. I should also say that if you want to watch more detailed videos on both of these guitars individually, I have those elsewhere on my channel, so you can watch those after. There'll be links in the description or in the cards. Enough talk then. This is the Harley Benton TE-62CC up against the Harley Benton TE-69TL Hot Rod NT Roasted. Let's play them now and we'll speak in more detail about them afterwards. Okay then, so that was the Harley Benton Battle of the Telecasters. That was the TE-62CC up against the TE-69TL Thinline, and I hope you enjoyed the playing and the tones. And I hope you've also come to appreciate, if you didn't really know it already, how different Telecasters are to Thinline types of Telecasters. They're both incredibly versatile instruments, they can both do pretty much everything, but they do it in a slightly different way. And so what I'm going to do now then is go into a bit more detail in my comparison between the two guitars and tell you my thoughts and my opinions about them. I've had this one for over a year, as I've said. I've had the TE-69 for a few weeks and I've played them both extensively in that time, and this is what I think about them. So we'll split this up into categories. I think we'll talk about the prices, we'll talk about the build quality of the guitars, we'll talk about the way they look, we'll talk about the way they sound, and we'll talk about which one I think is going to be the best value for money and which one I would personally buy if I was going to be buying one of them again. So let's get started then, and we'll start with the first impressions, which would probably be the way the guitars look. Now for me personally, I have to say that the TE-62CC wins that because it's Lake Placid blue and it has that really nice classic Tele thing going on, which I just love. However, I love Thinline Teles too, and I really do like the grain on the ash body of the TE-69. So this is definitely going to be a personal choice thing. For me, it's the TE-62. However, if Harley Benton was to ever do another version or other colours in the TE-69 range, you might have me thinking about which one I think looks better. The next thing we'd consider would be the price, and of course these are both very, very affordable guitars. Now the TE-69TL is the more expensive of the two at 219 euros, whereas the TE-62CC is 149 euros. So very, very cheap in the grand scheme of things, almost impulse buys. And if you think about it, you could purchase these two guitars for the same price as a Squier Classic Vibe Thinline Telecaster, so that's definitely worth thinking about as well. But in terms of price, is the extra value going to be worth it with the TE-69TL? Well, I'll discuss that in a little bit more detail later, but I do think you can see that there is extra stuff needed to produce that guitar. It's got the stack pickup, which is going to be more expensive, it's got the push-pull pot on the tone pot, which is a little bit more to think about, and it's got that semi-hollow ash body, so they're going to have to hollow out a bit of the body, they're going to have to put the top on. It all adds up to a bit more money, and with this one, with the poplar body, it's just different pieces of poplar being put together into the shape of a Telecaster, and then they're done. So this is definitely a cheaper guitar to produce, and I think that the price difference is probably just about justified in that regard. 149 euros or 220 euros, both very affordable, both very, very decent indeed. The next thing we can talk about is the build quality of the two guitars and the hardware, and they're both very even there, I would say. They've both got no-name Harley Benton stuff in terms of tuners, in terms of the bridge and that kind of thing, and they both work really well. Straight out of the box, straight from the factory, the tuners worked well on both guitars. They were both set up well too. The frets were good, the intonation was decent. The tuners, the pots, everything just seemed to work. And with the TE-69TL, you've got that extra push-pull tone pot. That works too, so that's no problem either. The one little thing that I found with the TE-69TL was that there is a little bit of untidy finishing around the F-hole of that guitar, but at this price point, you can't expect perfection. In terms of build quality and in terms of the feel of the two guitars, then very, very similar, and for the price that you're paying, very, very decent. And then we move on to the necks and the playability of these two guitars, because how a guitar plays is as important or more important than how it sounds. Now a lot of this comes down to the necks, but the rest of it comes down to the bodies too. They're both Telecaster shaped bodies, so both totally fine. In my book, I really like a Tele shaped guitar. Now the neck profiles are different on the two instruments, and that's something where you're going to have to find which works for you personally. They're both roasted maple necks or caramelized maple. However, we've got a neck profile on the TE-62CC which is described as modern D, and it's slim to medium in terms of size, and it's a D shape, so it's definitely going to feel different to the TE-69TL, which I would say is significantly thicker in terms of neck profile. That's more of a medium C shape. Now, it'll come down to personal preference which of the two necks you prefer, but for me personally, I like a little bit more wood in my hand when it comes to guitar necks, and I prefer the slightly thicker C-shaped neck on the TE-69TL. However, apart from that, they're both very similar because they're both roasted caramelized maple, they're both satin finished, they're both pretty sleek and slinky and a joy to play. I really enjoy them both. But if I could choose the profile, and if I could re-choose with the TE-62, I'd have the TE-69TL's medium C-shaped neck on this guitar as well, because I do just prefer it. In terms of the rest of the playability, the one issue that might affect you is the weight of the two guitars. Now, the TE-69TL is a lot heavier than I would like it to be. It's 3.85 kilograms, which is 8.8 pounds or thereabouts, and I think especially because that's a chamber guitar, it could be almost a pound lighter or half a kilogram lighter. I would really like it to be that way. The TE-62CC is not perhaps as light as you would think it might be. This specific one is 3.4 kilograms, which is about 7 pounds, 7 3/4 ounces. So it's not super light, neither of them are super heavy, neither of them are in true backbreaker 70s Les Paul territory, but they're both a tiny bit heavier than I would personally like them to be. Again, the weight of guitars is something that we all have personal preferences with. I like my guitars to be slightly lighter. Might not be an issue for you, but it's just something worth mentioning. Now, the weight is variable with guitars, of course. I've seen different weights on the TE-62CC guitars. However, with the TE-69TL, if you look on the Thomann website product page, you can see that it seems to be pretty much a standard theme that people are saying that guitar is just a little bit too heavy. Could be something to do with the ash bodies, but there you go, just something to think about if that could be a potential concern of yours. And then we come to that other all-important aspect, which is the sounds of the two guitars. Which of these two guitars sounds better? Which sounds more like a Tele? Leave me your thoughts and comments and tell me which one you thought sounded better and why. Now, I think that these two guitars actually, in some respects, they sound very similar, but in others they couldn't sound more different. Now, we'll start with the TE-62CC. This is much more classic Tele territory. You get those lovely twangy, sparkly cleans. You get really nice, aggressive, almost thinner sounding crunches and hard, high gain sort of sounding tones. You can take your head off with a Telecaster if you don't set it the right sort of a way, but it's brilliant for cutting through mixes too, and the TE-62 does that in spades. You can even play metal on it. It's not at home for metal, obviously, and you get noise from single coil pickups when you've got a lot of gain, like I had with the Rev G3 distortion pedal, but you also get oodles of clarity when you use single coils to play higher gain stuff. And so I really can recommend the TE-62CC for pretty much any style of music. It's a fantastic traditional sounding Telecaster. Now, the TE-69TL, well, that's actually less of a Telecaster. I mean, to start off with, it's a thin line, so it's got a more rounded, a sort of airier tone, as you might expect from a semi-hollow body, but we've got the added bonus of this stacked humbucking pickup in the bridge of the TE-69TL, and it doesn't really sound like a traditional Telecaster. As soon as we started playing the cleans, you can hear that it's thicker and warmer sounding. It does mellower, jazzy tones too. It's more like a slightly thinner Les Paul than a Telecaster, at least in my opinion, and that's great for certain things, but if you're looking for an old school Tele twang sort of a sound, you're not going to get it. And when you split the bridge pickup down to single coil mode, I'd say it's even thinner and twangier than a Telecaster. It's almost in Esquire sort of territory. So it's extremely glassy, it's extremely brittle, and you do have to take a bit of care when dialing it in. And I do have to say, I prefer the genuine single coil on the TE-62CC over the split coil on the TE-69TL. When we got into higher gain modes though, with the TE-69TL, with that stacked bridge humbucking pickup, you get some lovely hard rock tones. It's great for punk rock too, and obviously it's more suited for playing stuff like metal. So it's a much thicker sound, and you can split it down if you want that extra clarity with the split single coil mode as well. Now, one interesting thing about the TE-69TL is actually that when I was playing the high gain stuff, I found that the single coil mode was quieter than the humbucking mode. Maybe someone can explain that to me. I have no idea why that was the case, but it was so. That was my experience with it, something you might want to take into account as well. Overall then, they're both extremely versatile guitars. Now this is a versatile Tele, it can do all of that stuff and perhaps a little bit more, but the TE-69TL takes it up a notch with the added option of the humbucker. You can get thick sounds of a Les Paul type guitar, you can make it sound like a 339 or a 335, a semi-hollow or a hollow body guitar, and you can get a decent approximation of a Telecaster too. So that's an extremely flexible guitar and one that I would not hesitate to recommend if you're looking for one instrument to cover absolutely 100% of tonal ground. Now, if you've been watching this video and you're interested in getting a Tele type guitar at this sort of a budget, but you're not sure where else to go, well, Squier is going to be the obvious option. You can start with the most affordable Bullet Teles, you can then go up to the Squier Affinity Teles, and there is a really nice Affinity Tele Deluxe out there right now with humbuckers, which is kind of more in the Thinline Tele Deluxe type of direction. Those are about 280 euros. Or you can go up to Squier's Classic Vibe range. Those are considerably more expensive than the Harley Benton guitars. Like I said earlier in the video, you could actually buy a Squier Thinline Classic Vibe Tele for about the same price as both of these instruments. So that's the difference. That's going to be not too far short of 400 euros, but there are a wide variety of options there in the Squier line, so they're very much worth considering too. Now there's other Harley Benton Tele type guitars of course as well. You can even get a TE-20 single coil or double humbucking mode for under 100 euros, which is crazy cheap. I've not personally played those guitars, so I can't tell you how good they are compared to these ones, but they could be worth it, and they are incredible value for money at the end of the day. And otherwise, if you want to think slightly outside the box, I would recommend brands like Vintage, for example. Their V52 Telecaster type guitars are fantastic instruments. They do an Icon range, which is relict as well, and a lot of the guys out in Nashville seem to play those guitars, so that's definitely a seal of approval for those instruments. But there are many, many other brands that also make Telecaster types of instruments, so go down to your local music store, check out what else is there, and you'll definitely find something which is going to work for you. And so my final conclusion on these two guitars would be they're both fantastic value for money, as you always come to expect with Harley Benton. They're both built really, really well for the price. They both sound great for their price. They're both extremely flexible and versatile, and they feel good to play too. I really, really like the roasted maple necks. They're just a joy to play. And if you're a beginner looking for your first Tele, then either of these are going to be great. And if you're someone who's played guitar already and is looking to get into the Tele sort of a sound, well, I could heartily recommend both of these too. Now, the big question for me personally is, which one would I buy if I was going to be buying one of these again? Well, you know, I do have my number one guitar, which is my Fender Telecaster, and because of that, that kind of does everything that the TE-62 can do. And so in that context, I guess I'd say, well, maybe the TE-69TL is the one I would buy, because that gives me a slightly different flavor to my Tele, and it gives me a slightly different flavor to my Les Paul and the other guitars that I have as well. The neck profile on the TE-69TL is also a little bit more to my personal liking. It's slightly thicker, it's C-shaped, and it just feels really, really natural to have that guitar neck in my hand. I really dig the neck on the TE-62 as well, but again, I'd choose to have a slightly thicker C-shape if I could. So those would be my personal choices. However, if I was looking for a specific Telecaster guitar, or even more specifically, a traditional type Tele, it would be no question the TE-62CC. And in terms of value for money, for 150 euros or for 220 euros, you really can't go wrong. So 2 thumbs up from me for both of these guitars. If you're thinking of checking them out, do. If you've got any more questions, please ask me down there in the comments and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. Don't forget, I've got videos of both of these guitars individually that you can watch elsewhere if you want to hear them in even more detail and to get more opinions about them from me. But that's been it for today's video. I've been Rich for Rich Words Music, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.